Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to bring you my January wrap-up. I know a lot of people had a really fantastic reading month in January, but I think, scientifically speaking, I had the absolute best start when I picked up In Other Lands by Sarah Rees Brennan. This is a satirical queer fantasy about a bisexual boy named Elliot who is one of the few humans who can see and access this fantasy world called the Borderlands, and he thinks everything and everyone there is just a bad joke. Elliot is also extremely obnoxious to a fault, and everyone hates him, which is the only reason why he stays, because he has nothing and no one to go back to. The story is just about him figuring out his place in this world, whether he should keep coming back or give it up for the human world when in the Borderlands he might actually put his hard-to-handle personality to good use. This story is laugh-out-loud funny, but then it'll turn on you with the most real, most human moments and leave you breathless. Elliot might also be a total ass in the beginning, but he cares deeply about fairness and respect, and right from the start you see him fighting to protect those things. I think the story is really about wanting to be chosen by something or someone, but also the necessity of deciding to choose that thing or that person back. There's a really fantastic parallel between Elliot wanting to be chosen first by someone, especially when everyone in his life has openly despised and dismissed him, and his journey with this fantasy world that has, for some reason, chosen him. It's also about what Elliot calls the willingness to learn the language of strangers, to keep reaching out. Sometimes you're the one trying to connect with strangers, like Elliot struggling to understand his fellow cadets and friends, and sometimes you are the unknowable stranger being learned by others. But either way, it's essential to focus our efforts on bridging those gaps. Of course, it's also about coming of age, realizing the importance of evolving and growing, recognizing that what you say and do has an impact, and ultimately you want that impact to be positive. I am not doing this treasure trove of a story justice, but trust me, it is not to be missed and it will infuse your life with joy. I gave it a huge 5 stars. Then I read Love, Sugar, Magic, A Dash of Trouble by Ana Mariano. This is Own Voices middle grade about a Mexican-American girl named Leo Logroño whose family owns and operates a local bakery, and they're preparing for the annual Dia de los Muertos festival, which is their biggest event. Leo's mother tells her that she's still too young to help out this year, which hurts Leo's feelings and leads her to snooping around and finding out that all the women in her family are brujas, and they infuse magic into everything they bake. Well, Leo doesn't want to wait to come into her powers, so she steals her family's ancient recipe book because she figures trying out a small spell or two might accelerate the process. And we all know how that goes. This story beautifully represents Mexican-American values and culture, and especially how family calibrates our entire universe. I love how this story celebrates brujas, which often have a dark, negative connotation, but the brujas in the Logroño family have found a way to share their magic with their community as a form of positive energy and love. It's also important to think about how the story shows that shutting ourselves off and keeping secrets ultimately has an unhealthy effect on our lives. Her family's insistence on keeping secrets is what leads Leo to feeling cut off in the first place, from her family, her community, her culture, and that's why she's so desperate to feel like she's part of something, like she belongs. But then when Leo steals the recipe book and starts causing chaos, the tables turn, because suddenly she's the one keeping secrets, too ashamed and afraid to tell her family what she's done. And ultimately those mistakes can't be undone alone, they can only be fixed as a family when they focus all their power together. The same way the brujas in her family have found a way to channel their powers positively in the family business, when we open ourselves up and share what we have to offer, we can only grow stronger for it. The story does a great job of exploring those ideas while also putting fun new twists on classic spells gone wrong, and I highly recommend it. I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I finally listened to books 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 in the How to Train Your Dragon series by Cressida Cowell, read by David Tennant. I have been talking about this series for like my past 4 or 5 wrap-ups. The time for synopses has passed. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I love this series. There's something so powerful about these young misfit characters picking themselves up time and time again and proclaiming, I can only be exactly who I am, I cannot be anyone else. To know yourself, to know your capabilities, to refuse to force yourself into expectations that don't fit. That is nothing short of incredible. I also love that these last few books talk about how we have to keep believing people can change. We have to keep giving people chances. The moment we stop doing that, we're no better than those who seek to oppress us. And the story also acknowledges that the work it takes to create a world worthy of its inhabitants is work that cannot be done in one lifetime, in one generation, in several generations, but we inch closer to that world when we leave this place better than when we came into it. This is a really stunning series that I can't recommend enough. I gave these last 5 books respectively 4 stars, 5 stars, 4.5 stars, 5 stars, and again 5 stars. After that, I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This story is about Jude, who was 7 when a stranger came into their home and killed her parents in cold blood. Afterwards, she was taken to live in the High Court of Fairy, where absolutely no one is safe. Jude wants nothing more than to become a knight to the king so she can gain power and finally earn her place. But to do so, she must defy her family and the youngest prince, who makes her life a living hell, and she gets far more involved in twisted court politics than she ever planned until absolutely everything is at stake. This is a high-octane, highly intense story where so much is at stake and so many players are laying their own traps to further their own motives. I mean, it got to a point where I had to cover my eyes because I couldn't bear to read what was going to happen next, and then I was literally reading between the gaps in my fingers because I couldn't bear to not know. I love the element of court politics in the story because so many times in YA fantasy there's a young girl who goes to navigate a dangerous court, but nothing really ends up happening. This story is on the other side of that spectrum because it was so damn much, but in the best way. There's such a focus on characters exploiting each other's weaknesses and trying to outmaneuver other people's strategies before they even come into play. It's extremely satisfying to follow. Jude is ruthless and power hungry, and you feel so deeply for her as she barrels headfirst into risky situations because her desperation for power stems from how no one lets her forget that she is completely powerless. There's a really interesting dynamic between fairies and humans in this world where Jude and her sisters are allowed to live there, but they're constantly in fear of being exploited, humiliated, or even killed on a fairy's whim with their dark magic. Jude just wants to prove that she belongs. She wants to earn her place and stop feeling like she's this token human plaything. She wants to make her will the only will that matters, and I respect that she goes all in for that. Holly Black continuously brings us fantastically flawed characters who know that they're flawed and who make bad choices, and she says that's okay. They commit and they go there, and that's what makes the difference. The story itself is quality as hell, but there's also smaller details to appreciate, like Jude's older sister being openly bi, the stepfather-daughter relationship between Jude and Matic, who killed her parents, let's not forget, and how they acknowledge that love exists there, but it's not a comfortable kind of love. How Jude never implies that other women are less, even if she doesn't like them or understand them. How Jude separates the physical and sexual from the romantic. I mean, there's a lot here to appreciate. If I had to use one word to describe this reading experience, it would be exhilarating. This is one of the only books I've ever read where I legitimately didn't feel comfortable with 6% left, 5% left, 4% left, because I know it only takes that 1% for shit to flip like no one's business. I was continuously duped by my own damn feelings. I feel very strongly about this one, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read issue number 3 of Fence by Joanna the Mad and C.S. Pacat. This is a queer sports comic about 2 rivalry fencers, Nicholas and Seiji, who are both trying to get on the fencing team at a private school, vying for the same spot. There's nothing not to like about this comic series. It's unapologetically queer, it has a great cast of characters, the stakes are high, the training and tryouts are intense, and the way the illustrations capture the energy of movement is brilliant. The wait for issue number 4 has been killing me, but needless to say, I gave this issue yet again 5 stars. Then I felt like reading An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. This is an Own Voices queer Afrofuturistic narrative about a character named Aster who has lived her whole life in the low-deck slums of the HSS Matilda, a spaceship that has been unsuccessfully seeking the promised land for generations. This ship has taken on a hierarchy that mimics the antebellum South, where all the white people live in the upper decks with every comfort and all the black or dark-skinned people work the fields in the lower decks and often go without. The ship's leaders are also very religious and have imposed these harsh moral restrictions on Matilda's citizens, and the story is basically about Aster finding ways she can resist and maybe even escape. First of all, I have so much love for Aster, who is a non-neurotypical, queer, black, gender non-conforming character, and her perspective is so key in grounding this narrative. She's very scientifically minded, but she focuses in on these fundamentally human moments and emotions. Like, the story opens up with her amputating a child's foot, and even if you don't know anything about this spaceship, its hierarchy, or how it works, you know exactly what she has to do. You know what's at stake. She's a very straightforward, literal person who doesn't pick up on social cues or implications, and her perspective cuts through everything to give you a detail-rich scene that's very accurate. I also just related to her because, like, given the choice between romancing someone or having sex, she would rather go catalog the growth of her plants in her lab. That is a constant mood. There's also really great threads about Aster uncovering the secrets surrounding her mother's death and how that connects to not only knowing yourself, but knowing your history and where you came from and how formative and foundational that information is. And it's also about how knowing your origins and your history can empower the oppressed, because discovery is the true proponent of resistance. This is one of my new favorite sci-fi stories. The ending was a bit much and a little too abrupt, but otherwise I loved every moment and I gave it 4.5 stars. After that, I read Call Me By Your Name by André Aciman. This is a classic gay romance about a young man named Elio whose parents host an academic guest at their home in Italy every summer to help polish their manuscripts before publication, and this year he's taken a special interest in their summer guest. The story is mostly about them getting to know one another, testing each other's boundaries, and ultimately exploring the desire and intimacy that exists in their relationship. I personally found this to be a raw and honest exploration of queer desire and ultimately a discussion about how we navigate and negotiate attraction and intimacy. Elio is the real star of this story, and he's caged in by fear and shame, not because anyone is actively shaming him, but because no one's ever told him that it's okay to feel what he feels. He's coming to terms with his own desires and realizing that it's not shameful if it's part of himself. I identified with the way he kept negotiating his feelings, like, okay, if he just smiles at me, that will be enough. If he kisses me, that will be enough. If we touch, that will be enough. And what is enough constantly changes as their relationship develops. And it's also about how terrifying and disarming it is to not only want someone, but to not know how to handle it when that someone wants you back. There's also something to be said about a story that's not driven by fear of homophobia or homophobic acts. These two characters are free to explore their relationship without fear of retaliation or punishment, and that's powerful when you think about it. The writing for me was breathtaking. I think the film captured the tone perfectly. It's hazy and overbearing, and the words themselves crowd the senses. There are really long, winding passages that press down on you and feel like they're all strung together in one breath, and it's a really heightened experience. While reading this, I felt every inch of my body and I was so invested even if the story itself wasn't perfect. There were moments when Elio's obsession was maybe too intense, bordering on creepy. There were moments when those winding passages and chapters were a little too winding, but I still enjoyed this very much and I gave it 4 stars. Then my first poetry collection of 2018 was Full Metal Indigiqueer by Josh Whitehead. This is by far the most ambitious and narrative collection of poetry I've ever come across. As far as a synopsis, I'm actually going to defer to the back of this one because this is a high-grade concept. This poetry collection focuses on a hybridized indigiqueer trickster character named Zoa who brings together the organic, the protozoan, and the technologic, the binaric, to rebeautify and remember queer indigeneity. A two-spirit / indigiqueer invention, Zoa infects, invades, and infests as a virus inside canonical and popular works in order to recenter the lives of two-spirit individuals. I should also mention that Joshua Whitehead is a queer, native, two-spirit storyteller and poet. This collection tackles decolonization and erasure in really exciting ways. You begin with the creation of this two-spirit character Zoa, who is looking at our modern world and wondering, well, where am I in all this? And they're this really incredible entity that goes beyond human, beyond binary, beyond gender, beyond body. They access these popular stories or concepts like a virus, granting them self-access where they've always been denied access. Now, I want to be clear, it's not like these poems are queer retellings of classic literature or pop culture, but it is about injecting queerness and indigeneity where it has been historically ignored and erased. I also love how the speaker hijacks language and uses binary code to recreate words and concepts we know, and by definition makes them something new and different. Even though this collection has a bit of a learning curve, it is absolutely worthwhile and incredible. I gave it 5 stars. As if all that wasn't enough, on the last day of the month I read volumes 3 and 4 of Giant Days by John Allison, Max Sarin, and Lissa Treyman. This is a really fantastic slice-of-life comic series about 3 eccentric friends in university who are just doing their darndest to make it out in one piece. As I've said before, I love that this series covers a wide range of topics, from dating to passing classes, finding a major, competing for housing, trying to explore your own independence, and all the scary crap that comes with that. These girls try, they fail, they pick themselves up again, and through everything they always have this incredible bond to fall back on as support. This comic series is clever, heartwarming, over-the-top hilarious, brimming with levity and joy, and it's everything we deserve. I gave both of these volumes 5 stars. So those are all the books I read in the month of January. Of course, if you have read or would like to read any of the books I mentioned in this video, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. But that is everything I have for this wrap up today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!